We have quite a few things to talk about today.
Right.
Obviously, most of it is like church-related topics and issues. But before we get into all that, just like a general question, because we spoke on this a little bit that day, and I found it quite interesting what you had to say on this. Is like, what is your view, and how would you define spirituality personally for you?
That's a big question.
Yeah, it's big, but then we had the talk that day, so I'm just like...
Yeah. I was thinking about a question that a lot of theological students will come and ask me, when they're doing their research.
Okay.
They'll send me questionnaires and sometimes, face-to-face interviews. And one of the questions that most of them will ask is, how do you make your church people more spiritual? And
Okay.
I usually give them the answer. I don't try to make them more spiritual. I try to make them more unspiritual. And so, so I just say it for kind of maybe shock value. And then I kind of break it down and explain what I mean by that. For me, spirituality is very earthly. And so I like to talk about being earthly and how we must live our lives expecting God anywhere, even in the things of the world. For example, I believe God is present in the church building, and when we pray together, when we sing worship songs, God is present, and I meet God there. But God is just as present at the stadium where I go and play table tennis, and God is there.
Right.
And one place is not more spiritual than the other. Yeah. And so God is everywhere. We live in what I like to call a God-bathed world. It's like saturated with the presence of God.
Right.
And so everywhere we go, we are in the presence of God. And so every place becomes sacred. And so I must learn to meet God in the religious activities that we do, but I must also learn to find God in other things that we do, whether it is, watching a movie, or whether it is playing sports, listening to music, and not necessarily Christian music. I remember somebody who used to be part of our church. They have left as missionaries now, but he loved carpentry. And he made a comment once, and he said, when I do carpentry, I feel the presence of God.
Oh.
And so for him, that was his connection to God. So for me, spirituality is not just, religious activities.
Right.
And we must do those things. We must pray, we must
of course
read the Bible and all of that. But what if we begin to embrace other aspects of life? Because in church, we teach people how to read Bible. We teach people how to pray. But statistics have shown us that that's a very small percentage of our lives.
Right.
And the vast majority of our lives, we are doing
all these other things, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so are we to say that God is absent from most of our lives and only present when we do these religious things? And I like to say no. Like, we are to meet God everywhere.
Right.
Like when we eat a nice meal, it's like, wow, thank you, God.
I mean,
so that's how I see spirituality.
Right. I mean, that's a very interesting perspective. You shared a little bit about this the other day when we met, and it got me thinking also, and just this short story that you just shared about your friend, or the person who feels the presence of God and when he's doing something he loves.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just amazing how nice it is that,
Yeah,
like when you're doing something that you love, you can feel the presence, or I think our a lot of disclaimers are going to be here on this podcast today, because obviously the whole when it comes to the discussion about church and religion, it is sort of a very sensitive area. And so a lot of people do get offended, but I feel comfortable talking to you, and I feel comfortable talking about many things that I feel we should talk about. But as long as we're doing it in a respectful way.
Right.
But one thing I feel about the majority of our people and their concept of Christianity
Yeah.
is it seems to be a little off in the sense, generalizing a lot, but going to church,
Yeah.
giving your tithes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just doing that, sort of like, unfortunately, that seems to be for a lot of people what it qualifies to be a Christian. And unfortunately, I don't see it that way, and it seems to be quite a trend now.
Yeah,
What's your
yeah.
opinion on that?
See, I remember you mentioning, what are good things the church is doing, especially the church in Nagaland.
Oh yeah, let's
What
discuss
are
that.
areas where the church can grow, or what are, maybe, to use a negative word, what are some failures?
Yeah.
There are a lot of church critics these days, and they're not afraid to voice out their opinions about
Right,
church. And I think rightly so sometimes, that the church has a lot of failures.
Right.
But I was thinking, like, what if we wake up tomorrow morning and all the churches in Nagaland have disappeared?
Okay.
Would it be better for society? And some people may say yes, but I think not.
Yeah.
So with all of its failures, weaknesses, struggles, I think the presence of the church is good for us, good for our society. I think it is positive. And on the other hand, one of the struggles that I find, even as a pastor myself, and I'm sure in other churches, and I hope it connects to your question about what it means to be a Christian and all that.
Right.
I think we are struggling in equipping people, teaching people how to live life outside the church. And there are people who may be very good in church, and when it comes to church activities,
Right.
but how are you to live as a government officer? How are you to live your life as a businessman? I think that's where we are kind of struggling in equipping people. And so when we have too much of this is spiritual, this is secular kind of mindset, and we teach like that, and the problem is that people begin to think, whether consciously or unconsciously, they begin to act out a life where, I mean, their life is so divided. And so they can be very good in church and faithful tithe payers.
I totally understand.
And
Yes.
very regular in church, but then they can go to their jobs
And
and
be very unchristian,
corrupted.
like, yes.
Very corrupted.
Right. Exactly.
Because God is not interested in that, according to this faulty,
This whole image of what it means.
Exactly.
I totally get that.
And so I can be corrupt in my office as long as I'm very good in church. I can skip my office work because even though people need me there, and because I am serving God in church, singing in the choir or whatever,
Right.
because that is serving God. But
All these other things.
but I think we have to change that mindset and begin to think, no, like, you serve God
Right.
in the hospital, you serve God in the courtroom, you serve God in your government office, and what you do there is your service to God, and that is your ministry.
I like I just mentioned about how Sato was here the other day, and one point that he made, which I felt just relates to what we're just talking about today, is like also our our perception of or how we view people,
Right.
and what is a good person, in today's society.
Yeah.
Like we're saying, like a person who goes to church regularly on Sundays, and then gives his tithes, and helps out during the programs and stuff like that. Whereas he could, like at home or at work and away from church,
Yeah.
be a totally different person. Whereas someone who is unable to come to church regularly and or you know, can't even pay his tithes regularly,
Yeah.
but could be a very good person, like, you know, the character of him, like helping his family or friends or whatever he's doing that's busy keeping him unable to, you know, like the perception and this image that we're painting of what it means to be a good Christian today, and in our society, I feel is like it's very misconstrued.
Yeah. Speaking about, you know, this whole image of being a Christian, I think even for us as leaders, you know, pastors, and some level of leadership,
Right.
I think that is a big issue. The church or Christians being authentic and even being vulnerable. And so I think there's a lot of pressure that a Christian must look like this. And so there's this image that we have, and we don't want anyone else to see that, you know, we also have struggles, that we make mistakes. One Christian leader said, even leaders have toilets, and they poop and they use it.
Right.
It's not like, you know, leaders have no mess. You know, we do have messes in life. We do have issues.
That's what makes us human.
Yeah, and I want to say this, that I think the Christian culture, one of the dangers is that we tend to idolize leaders, and you know, these days I think we have too much of celebrity leaders, celebrity pastors even.
Okay.
And I think it's a real danger for us. Like for example, for me as a pastor, if there's too much of that, and I don't know I begin to forget myself, that I'm human, just like anyone else. So, and this image that people have of me or of any other leader, there's so much pressure to just keep that facade on all the time, you know, and we wear a mask and we don't show our weakness to anyone. We are not vulnerable. We are not authentic.
Right.
And but no, like we struggle, and like I have made mistakes. As a leader, I have created messes and made wrong decisions as a leader and as a human being. I have made wrong decisions, and decisions that have really hurt people, and where I have had to even stand before our own congregation and apologize and kind of tell them, hey, sorry, I messed up. And so it is a journey of I think we just need to learn to be authentic, be vulnerable, and admit to each other and to ourselves that we are flawed people, that we are broken in different ways, and it's a journey of grace and mercy and forgiveness.